to the inaugural TCA podcast called TCA Crossroad, a podcast where entrepreneurs and investors meet. This first episode is going to talk about the toughness in the funding environment today, but over time we'll talk about other issues that would be appropriate for investors and entrepreneurs both. Technology, advice from entrepreneurs, regulatory environment, legal environment, ethics, and we'll get to a variety of topics as indicated by the listeners and what you all want to hear. Today, we're going to talk to two people. One is a super angel named Dave Berkus. The other one is a founder and CEO, Bill Colone. They'll introduce themselves. My name is David Friedman. I've been an investor with TechCoast Angels for 14 years, and I'm currently chairman of the Board of Governors. And TCA is a group of 5 networks. We have over 400 members. We have 4 funds. We're all accredited. We have money available in our funds today for startups. As we start, I want to introduce my co-host, Costin Tuculescu. And Costin, tell us about yourself, because you have a unique background as an entrepreneur and also as an angel investor.
Awesome. Thank you, David. I'm so excited to be here for the inaugural TCA podcast and being part of this as a co-host for the foreseeable next episodes. My background with TCA goes back about 10 years when I had my own startup, anymeeting.com. We're a video conferencing company that I exited in 2017 to a large unified communications player. If only we could have foreseen the pandemic, that video conferencing exit would have been significantly different. But so I've been on both sides. I pitched TCA, Pasadena Angels, all the local angel groups up in the Bay Area. So I've seen what it's like for an entrepreneur to go through the process. And then I believe it was around 2018, 2019 that I joined TCA Orange County and been going some of the events. I haven't done a ton of investing, but I've been investing in the funds. I love meeting the new companies and mentoring whenever I can. And super pumped to be here with you to do the TCA podcast.
I met you at the Pacific Club. I remember the first time I met you. I was thinking about it this morning. You tried to hit me up for money then. I should have invested in you then. Who knew 14 years later you and I would be co-hosting a podcast? And this is just so much fun.
That's awesome.
I want to ask you a question. As we try to figure out what we wanted to do with this TCA podcast, we talked about different names. Why did we choose Crossroads?
Yeah, and we went to ChatGPT and we got a list of like 30 different names, and we had all kinds of flavors. But TCA works with entrepreneurs. TCA tries to help build companies, build great things, and doing all of that is hard. It's hard for the investors to pick the right companies that are going to be winners. It's hard for the entrepreneurs and the companies to achieve their goals. And at every phase of building a company and making investments, you find yourself at crossroads. You find yourself having to make good decisions, choosing the right people, choosing this outcome versus that outcome, sacrifices, etc. I felt that the word crossroads had the right tension that is kind of part of being an entrepreneur, part of being an investor, building and innovating and this whole thing. So I love it. And David, I'm glad you liked it as well. And, we'll see how.
I don't think I had a choice, did I?
No, you did. I went down the list.
We let ChatGPT govern that one.
No. It was simply an assistant and we picked that one. It was awesome.
But, it's interesting, in Alice in Wonderland, it was said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So to me, Crossroads is us in TCA being smart money, helping the entrepreneur like Bill get to the road of success. So I think it's a really important thing. I think it's a very positive thing. We can be extraordinarily helpful, and we'll hopefully today share what some ideas are from the entrepreneur's point of view as well as the investor point of view, what will make you successful, especially in these tough times. So I'll turn it over to you, Costin, to kick it off.
Yeah, so well, let's introduce our two amazing guests again on the inaugural podcast. We are so lucky to have the super angel himself, Mr. Dave Burkus. I've heard you have over 100, 120 investments. Dave, tell us about yourself. What have you done?
Well, I wasn't one of the six people around the table that conceived the idea of TechCoast Angels, but Luis Villalobos did invite me in at the very beginning. And so I was, I guess, a charter member of the TechCoast Angels back in the beginning of 1998, and was the third chairman, because two of those people around the table were the first and second. So I have been chairman or president of the Orange County Network, David, I don't know if you knew that, and chairman of the Tech Coast Angels for 2 terms, way back when that was allowed. So it turns out that in 2010, in one of the strategic planning meetings, we decided to start a fund. And I had no idea when I volunteered, having already managed 2 funds, one of them very successful, that I would manage 3 more for the Tech Coast Angels and then another one that followed. So I have managed 6 funds, made 206 investments, have a personal internal rate of return of 97% going back to 1993. Now, I can explain that later, and it's not for right now. But that's a lot of investments, more than you thought, Costin. And
Yeah.
I can give you some stats that are really fun, just for the top of it all. There are 113 of them still going after all of this time. And 6 of them make 90% of all of my wealth. Now that tells you
Wow.
that we could either be going to Las Vegas together and doing a better, faster job, or we can wait and get our typical 23 to 26% IRR by being very patient investors and doing a very good job together of finding the right kinds of companies, doing the right due diligence, and coaching them. I've been a chairman of over 40 of them. Today, I'm chairman, even after all this time, of 10, not chairman. I'm on 10 boards. I'm chairman of 6 of those. And so I have some real insight into how these companies today are raising their money, when they have to raise money, if that money is available, and if so, is it an up round or a down round? And as we contribute to this podcast, I'll kind of share some of that.
And with Bill Colone, we're going to have another super unicorn exit. So I want to set the stage right for everybody here.
Yeah, and thank you, Dave, for that wonderful intro. And I do think David Friedman, we got to get Dave back. Talk about his process. Talk about how he picks those winners to get that huge IRR.
Absolutely.
And
But
add corporate governance to that, because I think one of the big gains that come to these portfolio companies are the association with intelligent people who've done it before, and boards of directors and boards of advisors, a specialty of mine.
Yeah. We'll put that down as a future episode, because I think personally that would be very interesting, and there's a whole bunch of things that we can do again to help the entrepreneur. So
Absolutely.
let's turn to Bill.
yeah, without further ado, Bill Colone, CEO of SinglePass. Welcome to the podcast. Why don't you tell us about SinglePass and the state of the company, and educate us.
Thank you. Well, how do I follow Dave? Who can follow that? I mean, you need to do a whole series of Dave's podcasts. I have 400 questions after listening to his intro. But Bill Colone, CEO of SinglePass. It's a device startup company. It's just a little bit more than 2 years old. So I have a degree in chemical engineering. I've been designing and developing medical devices for over 40 years. Probably have taken at least a dozen from concept through commercialization. Some for corporations, some for startup companies. But SinglePass, a new idea that got put in front of us 2.5 years ago, did a lot of diligence. It's an electrocautery device for biopsy closure, which we thought was clever. And it took us a while to get the company organized, pitched. TCA has been a fantastic supporter. We've made great progress. And before we got on the air, I was telling David we just received notice we're going to get the CE mark imminently in the next 30 or 60 days. So things are going well. But serial entrepreneur, have done this a few times before, had exits before, have also sold technology before. not companies, but certain product deals. So this is what I like to do. We get a lot of deal flow because of our past success and our connections, and it's been great that TCA has been able to support us.
That's awesome. And Bill, I just want to make sure it comes out across as clear as possible for folks that maybe aren't in the medical device space or not medically oriented. Tell us just in layman's terms exactly what your product does.
So when you get a biopsy procedure, maybe on your kidney, liver, or lung, and they poke a large hollow needle in you and reach in and grab a tissue sample, now they literally just pull the needle out and apply pressure on the skin and hope you don't bleed. We have physicians that invented an idea where we have a probe that's small enough and skinny enough that goes into that guide needle before we remove it, and we simply heat seal or cauterize all the tissue that's damaged by these biopsy needles. So essentially, we prevent complications that can be caused by bleeding after biopsy procedures. So it's very simple, easy device to use, single-use disposable, very clever. We already have 2 issued patents on it, and there literally is no competition. No one else has a similar device.
And how big of a problem is this? Just to give our
gosh.
viewers and listeners scope of
Huge
the
problem.
market for that.
Over 5 million biopsy procedures every year, growing 10% a year. The problem rate is single-digit percentage, but if you have a bleeding issue, it's tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to correct. In addition to that, since they have no way to control the outcome of the procedure right now, they simply keep patients in the hospital for several hours after each procedure, which we believe we can eliminate. All they're doing is monitoring them before they send them home. We think we can eliminate that hold time. So between eliminating or reducing adverse events and being able to send folks home sooner, we can save a lot of money to the healthcare system and
Excellent.
and improve
Right.
the safety of the procedure for patients.
Sure. Great. So I think I get it. I think I get what the company is, what it does. I think I get what Dave Burkus does. And you know, we're here to really learn more about how he became such a successful angel investor. But the topic of today's podcast is really this roller coaster ride that the economy's been on. I would say kind of bipolar within 2 years, you know, maybe within 18 months, where we went from high highs of tech companies having insane valuations to crashes, and then, you know, I believe some of the data I've seen, VC fundings are down 50% year over year. I think David and Dave, maybe you guys have some other data as to like what's happened in the last couple of years with COVID and everything. Before we dive into some specific questions, do you guys have a sense of the magnitude of the change in the last couple of years as to how hard it has become for startups to raise funding?
I think I can speak to that. Money flows downhill, and when the public markets are in trouble, the angels don't want to put quite as much money into the deals as they might have before. And it's evidencing itself starting in the second half of 2022. And in my opinion, will go until about the second half of 2024. There are some circumstances that may change that. But what it means is if the public markets don't begin to climb again, as they did for 9 years, if the private equity markets don't invest more faster, the private equity markets have a whole lot of capital sitting on the side, dry powder. The angels are not going to be the same kind of investors as the private equity investors because they raised their funds earlier, large as they may be. And the angels, of course, are spending money kind of based upon the wins. There are 2 things about that. Number one, we make our money going into a deal, meaning low pre-money valuations when we first make our investment. And we have to be very long-term investors. The private equity market likes to flip between 3 and 5 years. We find, by our own statistics, we're between 7 and 10 years. So the bottom line is, angel or early stage investing, which is primarily our focus today, is going to be very much affected by the people above us, namely the public marketplace. And I have stats that we can prove that too.
But the good news, Dave, is that, you know, at least the angel investing market has changed. When you started the ACE funds, it was very different. Those were unique. Today, we have funds with money in the funds. The problem that I see, and then I want to turn it over to Bill and ask him his perspective, is that the sidecars are based upon how well the economy is doing. The funds have money set aside, so we do invest. But last year, TCA invested about $400,000 on average in 41 deals. So it wasn't too bad, and it's been pretty consistent over the last several years.
I agree.
But let
I
me
want you to be
Go ahead.
tempering that by taking the halves of last year. The first half was very good and profitable. The second half began to freeze, and the first half of this year will show the same. I don't want to be a doomsayer, but I do want to say that there is this following the public market trend that is hitting the angel market as well. But in the same time, I've got to say that the valuations are at least stabilizing, if not coming down. And my statement
Yeah.
about you make your
Yep,
money
yep,
going in has been proven for me so many times that I'm very careful about overvalued investments going in.
So let's turn it over to Bill. Bill, you had two investments by TCA over a period of time. You've been in the business for a few years. What was the difference in your first round with TCA versus your last round in TCA, or others that you dealt with, other angel groups or other investment groups? How did it change? How did it affect your approach to funding? And did you find it more difficult, or did you find you had to be more specific? Give me some context.
Yeah, I think what you and Dave have both said has held true, but we tend to target, and just what Dave referred to, really low pre-money valuations. We understand that there's a market for that. We know that's what we need to be successful. And the early money in, and like Dave said, you make your money on coming into the deal because of the low pre-money valuations. I think we saw end of last year and early in 2023, it wasn't too tough to raise money. Then the middle of 2023, it got very difficult. And I think, again, because we deal with a lot of high net worth individuals who lost money in real estate or cryptocurrency or the public markets.
Yep.
And so that dried up a lot of the angel funds. But then with the groups like TCA that already had the fund there, I think the other thing too, we needed to show progress and success. Once we started having clinical results that were excellent, it was very easy to fill our Series B, or Series A, which we did. So I think we probably stay under the radar by knowing that the seed rounds are always typically less than $2 million. The pre-money value, well, either we do convertible notes for the seed round, or we do very low pre-money valuations. And the folks that came into the SinglePass seed round, they've more than tripled their money in 18 months because of.
Well, I'm as an investor, I'm certainly glad to hear that. I'll tell you right now. Did you find that the angel investors did anything different in their due diligence early on when you first got money versus the last round? Was it more difficult? Did they ask harder questions, or was it just an issue of traction?
I think it was mostly an issue of traction. I think those that invested were wise in that they had a clinical expert who had knowledge of our field. So groups that passed just didn't have the ability to do the technical assessment. So every time I did a diligence call where they had an experienced interventional radiologist on the call, those went well and we got investment. If they couldn't get the right sense of the technology and the market it served, folks tended to pass. But of course it did help. We made traction. We did a beautiful clinical study that had fantastic results. But again, we try to fly under the radar so the public markets don't affect us that much, and everything that's happening with cryptocurrency and rising interest rates doesn't affect us that much. So we have that target that we seek that keeps things at that lower intro level. So although it was easy, difficult, and then easy, it has bounced a little bit with the market.
So let me summarize for a second. So, and just a data point, when was your first round raised?
It literally was 24 months ago.
24
It was
months
$1.5 million
ago. So
on a convertible note. That was pretty
May
easy.
2021?
Yep.
Yeah. And that was easy. Money was flowing, right? Okay. Then you put that money to work, you started getting traction, and then did you say that next round was more difficult?
Yeah, we came back in January of this year, and it was tough. Or no, excuse me, January of last year, 2022.
Yeah.
it was tough. We raised a little bit of money. Then there was probably a 6-month period where we raised zero.
Right.
We made traction once we showed clinical results. Then it filled pretty quickly. So essentially, first half of 2022 was really difficult. Second half, because of traction, and I think things loosened up a little bit, it became easy. We actually we had so much interest, we extended the round until early 2023 because people were writing checks, and we even had some individuals write checks as much as $250,000. So that showed that it was there. I think two different individuals wrote $250,000 checks in the last round.
Wow.
Hey, Dave Burkus, when you look at the environment today, vis-a-vis 2 years ago, when you look at a deal, do you do anything different in your due diligence? Do you probe more deeply, or are there certain areas that you look at more than others? Just curious to how you are thinking today is different because of the environment we're operating
Yeah, in
in.
fact, let me go back to the beginning of TCA. There weren't that many deals. The prices were low, and it was easier to make money than it is today. So I am, a fan of the low pre-money, as you heard twice now. And the amount of due diligence, I am a contrarian. If you look at the amount of due diligence and compare it to the success, John Harbison's report says more due diligence, more success. In my experience, they aren't necessarily tied one to another. The amount of due diligence is less important than understanding more about the team than the idea. I know that's a little strange. So I look at the team in depth.
All right, so that's the when just to put it in perspective, when we in TCA look at a deal, the number one thing that we look at is the CEO and the team. We've just developed some new tools that we're going to be using to evaluate the CEO, because that becomes the critical element, especially if the winds change in the environment and you have to pivot. And pivoting, will happen quite often, as you know, from all the investments that you have made.
Yeah, I think we've heard the same. We've had that feedback a lot, and we have a handful of folks that every company we start, they invest in. They don't even need to understand the product or the market. They just go, Bill and Dave, my partner, it's another, count me in. And so we've received that. I mean, everything we go through as far as marketing and IP and everything, and then you find out, hey, they kind of don't even care. A lot of them, it's just, if it's us, it's good. It's comforting, but also there are some of the companies that have put us through some pretty severe diligence. So you have to be prepared for both. But I think I agree with Dave. A lot of times, folks are betting on the team, and their experience and their past success.
Well, let's talk about the second element that always comes up, and that is the product market fit. So SinglePass is extremely focused in a very discrete area with a very discrete device. Okay, so by dint of having that clarity in product and product evolution, it makes it easier for you to stay focused, put the money where you can get the biggest benefit. And then I want to go back to Dave and talk about focus versus being diffused. So did you find that being really focused in an area and knowing your target market, knowing which investors would be most interested, helped you?
Yeah.
That's a leading question, by the way.
Absolutely, because, I think we have 11 interventional radiologists, investors, because they will use the product, so that helped. And there was temptation all along the way where folks said, hey, this technology could be used here, it could be used there, if you made this change. And so no, we're not going to do that. We have the only electrocautery biopsy closure device. That's all we're going to do. We're going to focus on that design, that development, that regulatory approval, that commercial launch. Then we'll think about looking outwards. So you have to stay focused. You don't want to spend the money on these other things. And you're right, it's easier for folks to do due diligence if you're singularly focused on that target market.
Dave, do you want to comment on product market fit and focus versus going after everything that's on the wall?
Totally agree. First of all, each of us who makes an investment has a background where we're comfortable. In my case, it was enterprise software. And so I would seek out enterprise software and be more successful with those because I knew the questions to ask, just like what Bill said about the radiologist. So when you have a group of 300 and you have each one having had a different background, it does add to the ability to find experts within your group to be able to ask the right questions. One of the reasons why being a member of a group like TechCoast Angels is very important for an investor.
And I didn't put you up to saying that.
Yes, you
did
did. I just read that on the screen.
Yeah.
And speaking of focus, gentlemen, I'm going to bring us back to the main topic of the current funding climate. How can we help founders and entrepreneurs? And then how can we help investors make sure that they're picking the winners? So going back to the current climate, we heard it was very easy 2021. It was raining money. Then Bill was successful. It became harder, but then he was able to find success because of the traction. And I think this is a key theme that entrepreneurs need to hear. The investors are in the catbird seat now. It's an investor market. They get their pick of the litter, and you need to show not just a deck, not just an idea. I think there's much higher expectations now that you're talking to customers, you've got revenue, you've got working product, more so than obviously ever before, but definitely more so than 2021. So how do you guys feel about what is needed today to get an entrepreneur successful and over the hump and raising their
You
round?
just answered the question before you gave us a chance to do it.
Right. Yeah, sorry.
The product market fit is number one. We talked about the team, but it's also important that you have already found potential customers willing to say that if you will do what you say you'll do, and your product is already at the wireframe or your early stage where you can actually show a product, you have a much better chance for investment of higher amounts from angel groups. So we recommend now, since this environment has changed, friends and family are the only way you're going to get investments for an idea. And you're investing in the person, not even the team. And when you finally get that product market fit down, and we all know we pivot, and when you finally get to a point where you have some kind of a prototype or a wireframe, and you can show it off to a potential customer, you suddenly are beginning to get into the market for the angel groups. And the angel groups will feed today what used to be venture capitalists. Today they will feed micro venture capitalists. And this ecosystem has changed. There are more people with more money out there, but they're, at this moment in time, a little more afraid to deploy.
That's right. So to you, Bill, what advice would you have that would work today that maybe it worked in 2021 but wouldn't work today?
No, boy.
Does that make sense?
I think I know more of what would work. I mean, really, we did a lot of diligence before we decided to start the company. I called dozens of interventional radiologists, and it wasn't always the same feedback. But I knew there were a certain percentage of interventional radiologists that wanted this product. I also talked to some companies that were in this space that either did oncology or did biopsy and had learned that, yeah, we had thought of a similar idea before. We just kind of never got around to it. So when I knew it was on the radar for some of the large companies and the interventional radiology feedback was positive enough, and then also when we did float it to our physician network, and a handful right out of the gate said, yeah, we'll invest. So we said we needed that. We were fortunate that we had physicians that had already created a working prototype. They had one issued patent already plus one pending. So they had made enough progress. And then our business model, since we use a contract manufacturer literally right next door, we basically start every project on second base. We already have a facility, we already have a team, we already have a quality management system. So that the day we get the initial funding, we are up and running. I don't have to rent a building, build a clean room, hire full-time employees. So that business model allows us to get to the finish line faster and for less money.
You've already
So we
checked
look
all the
at things
boxes.
that fit into that. And the team is super experienced, so that's very helpful.
And I think everything you just said translates to traction, meaning you had traction with customer interviews, customer discovery. On the product development side, you were validating the market fit with the market. So walking in with that amount of traction makes the process a lot easier, right?
Yeah, I think it's tough if you're a new entrepreneur, you haven't done it before, you don't have a team that's done it before, you don't have the connections we have. There's 4 of us, over 100 years of experience. We have over 150 issued patents in the group. So we've done this a little bit. So I think it's tough. I've seen a lot of good ideas come across my desk, and I feel sorry for those folks that can't get funding, even though I think, hey, this may be a clever idea. So I'm not sure what the new entrepreneurs can do, because I do think right now it is tougher unless you've had past success.
Yeah. And so it feels like the bar has been raised, and I'd love everybody to chime in on this. Like, the bar is much higher. You know, a couple of years ago, you had an idea, you'd find some funding. Now everything that you just said is on the table and required. Does everybody agree with that?
Yeah, I'll let the investors, what you guys look for.
The answer is absolutely. And it was fun to hear
Yeah.
Bill a minute ago give his story, because he did check all the boxes. And so, that's one where I would invest, because it does check all the boxes, as opposed to
We don't
Bill,
have
you
any
have an
rounds.
open round.
Round
You
is
can get
closed.
that big check from Mr. Burkus.
The round is closed. We think we can get to an exit with what we've collected. So that's the
Good. That's even better.
because
So we're kind
David Freeman's
Any
already in.
advice?
yes.
Yeah,
He is.
twice. Yeah.
Do you guys have any advice for the first-time entrepreneur that's passionate, and she's got the passion, but maybe she doesn't have the experience. She's got the knowledge. She knows how to get it done, but again, hasn't done it before. What advice would you have for that type of entrepreneur?
Oh boy, I'll let Dave go on this. This is a tough one.
Oh, this is easy. Finding advisors and forming a board of advisors, even if you're at the idea stage, is not hard. I mean, Uncle John is probably going to be an advisor because he has a business that's up and running, even if it's dry cleaning and that has nothing to do with technology. And then you fill that out with somebody who's accounting experience, somebody who has a little legal experience. It's all about running the business and understanding how to pivot and finding your product market fit. And other people can help.
Should they wait, though, to raise money until, say, March 2024? Like, when should they start considering raising money?
Okay, so you've asked that twice. I guess we have to answer it. You can raise money today. David said that each of the chapters of TechHost Angels has a fund. They raise the funds from the members who believe that, first of all, diversification is number one. Funds do that. And
Right.
number two, it is the collective intelligence that makes the decision. And that's much more important than somebody taking a chance. And so with that, there are funds available. They are fairly large in quantity if you get multiple chapters of TechHost Angels piling in with their funds. So today isn't as bad as it might be. If this were the individual angel environment of 10 years ago before the funds, well, I started ours in 2010. 15 years ago, before the funds became the method with which most of the angel groups were investing, this would be a very difficult period until, as I said, the middle of 2024.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
I agree with that. And again, I think it's the only thing they can do. Get experienced advisors if you can. I'm actually on 4 boards, 3 more in addition to SinglePass. And that's key. If you're starting from scratch, that initial, whether it's a board of directors or advisory board, is critical.
Yeah, let's flip it. We're basically out of time. I mean, I would love to continue another half hour, an hour. I mean, I think the stories, the advice you can give, are great. But what would be the 1 or 2 things you want to leave for either the investor or the entrepreneur? Bill,
Yeah.
we'll start with you this time.
You know what?
You're not getting out. You're not getting out of
No,
this.
you
You
know-
can't deflect.
Hey, 80% of the success is showing up. I'm telling you, the network that I developed over 40 years, because I went to everything and I showed up for everything and I stayed for everything, and I continue today to go to every local chapter meeting for Device Alliance, for Octane, for Medical Innovation Exchange. Occasionally you'll end up meeting a critical connection that helps you. And so it's, work. go to work. You can't be successful sitting at
Go to
home.
work.
Do the work.
Yeah. Dave, final words on it, then I'll turn it over to Costin to close it
Let
out.
me reinforce what Bill just said a minute ago. As an investor, I began before TechCoast Angels by a good 6 years. And the only way that I could get my deal flow was by networking. And so if I'm to give advice to either an investor or an entrepreneur, it is networking above all, to begin to learn and to begin to find contacts and then use those contacts.
Yeah. The other thing is not only is learning and building the contacts, we believe in the CEO because we trust them to be a good steward of our money. So getting early on and making the relationships with the investors engenders trust. And I think that's really where I look at to the CEO as well as the product market fit and other considerations. Costin, bring us home.
Yeah, so just to synthesize what we've heard, there's still reason to be optimistic. There's dry powder out there. There's funds out there. If you're an entrepreneur trying to build a company, surround yourself with a great network, great advisors, smart people, and get out there and do the work. And then, maybe pitch some of these gentlemen or myself. Look for us at the networking events. Get yourself out there. And with that, we'll wrap it up. This was our first episode of the TCA Crossroads podcast. Thank you, Dave Burkus. Thank you, Bill Colone. Thank you, David Friedman. Great work. We'll see you guys soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you soon, folks.